Stop. Talk to me.
Hi, Grant.
Crystal, so good to be with you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. This is a pleasure. We had an interview with Walking Shield. Do you want to say a little bit about what they do?
Well, I mean, I know that they are committed to improving the lives of Native communities across the country. And in particular, that involves working with government, really building out capacity for those tribes.
They really bridge the worlds, or try to, of the sovereign tribal nations and connecting them with philanthropy and with the military and with, as you said, government, and trying to open up pathways of opportunity and to get all of us to see differently what the opportunities should be for people on tribal lands. So we spoke with Dr. John Castillo and Mariano Diaz, and we probably should just dive in and let them speak for themselves about the work, and then we'll come back and wrap up.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
All right, Dr. John Castillo and Mariano Diaz, it is a delight to have you both here with me. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So let's dive in by talking about the mission of Walking Shield, what it's about, and what brought you each to this work. And Dr. Castillo, I'd like to start with you. How did Walking Shield come into being? What is its mission, and what drew you to it?
Oh, sure. Walking Shield, I was approached. Phil Stevens, our founder, Phil Walking Shield Stevens, our founder, was approached by these Jesuits from the Red Cloud Indian School, which is on Pine Indian Reservation in South Dakota, to raise money to buy computers for the young people there. And then, as he created that, these Jesuits said, "Why don't you?" He was Ogallala, so he's from that area, but he'd never been to Pine Ridge because he grew up in East LA. They asked him, "Why don't you come to the reservation and see what it's like?" And he went to Pine Ridge, saw how poverty-stricken it was, and still is to a certain extent, very sad. And it changed his whole life. He came back, he talked to his family, sold his business, which was Ultra Systems. He helped make the circuit board for the Minuteman missile program. So he became pretty wealthy and decided to go ahead and sell his business and lead Walking Shield for many years until his retirement about 22 years ago. We were incorporated in 86. And so that's been how it started. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for our Native communities on and off reservations, which we've been doing since 86. We have a lot of services and programs, received a lot of both national and local awards for our work. We're a very small team where we're able to leverage large resources.
So I want to just come back to the question for both of you to answer, if you would, about how you came into this work and why it's important for you. So, Dr. Castillo, why don't we start with you?
We got raised by our parents to be to assist and work with the community. So my sister was in the police department for 34 years. My brother's a behavioral therapist in Arkansas. My little sister's a nurse. So we're always community driven. And since we more or less grew up in Orange County and in Los Angeles, there's a lot of Native people, particularly in Los Angeles. So we were able to connect with our other Native groups. And so once I got my license, when 16, I started going to powwows and hanging out with the other Native people, and ended going to UCLA and graduating with my master's, and ended up working at the Indian Center in Los Angeles. And then got promoted several times until I ended up at the Orange County Indian Center back then. There was another Indian Center. And then I became director of there that incorporated both Los Angeles, Orange County, and part of Riverside in its service area. So I think of my parents were our biggest folks that influenced us, to help our people.
Nice. And Mariano, what about for you?
My background is in comprehensive community development, that I've done that about 40 years total. Um, and when I decided to leave National LISC, I really wanted to be more focused in my work. So I started my own consulting firm, and just to really be specific of who and why I would work in certain communities. And a mutual friend introduced me to Dr. Castillo, and Walking Shield is an organization. And I really felt it was a professional and personal alignment of what I wanted to do. And now been with the organization 7 years as a senior fellow.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for that background. I want to talk a little bit about giving some context to this conversation in terms of San Diego. It is often surprising to people that we have the highest number of tribes per capita in the country, that we also have the largest number of federally recognized tribes in the for a county in the country, and I'm curious what that, when you think about what that means for San Diego, why is that important? Can you break that down for us a little bit?
They've been there for a long time, and of course, many of them ended in on reservations that are very rural. There's one reservation in San Diego nobody can live on. It's all mountains and stuff, so everybody's off reservation. So it's a lot of them have a lack of water, which is a big use thing in Indian country and throughout the United States and California, of course. So you have those that are a bit fortunate, of course, with their casinos, but not everybody has a casino. I think about half of them have some, and the other half don't. And of course, we work with the ones that have nothing, basically, where one of the reservations in San Diego, half that reservation doesn't even have electricity. That's you would think that'd be different in San Diego, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a very strong community. And I think having those many tribes together, it's been a good thing. They have the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, which has those 18 tribes and the tribes in Riverside and San Bernardino, and so it's great work, and it's nice to see a lot of tribes together in one area. Mariano probably added some more because he's been working with us on these tribes.
Mariano, as you answer that, expand on that, could you also talk a little bit about why it matters, that what it means when we use the term sovereign nation to refer to tribes?
Oh, absolutely. Well, a lot of it got started when I was at the San Diego Foundation. One of my core responsibilities was to make the foundation more relevant to the surrounding communities in the county and in the region. I became aware of the number of Native American tribes in the county, and more specifically, the border region, and that it was a shared border. I mean, when you look at that, it became very obvious and natural in the movement of people that you would uncover these core facts. But what was surprising in that the Native American community was, as the original people in this region of the country, had a lot to add in terms of the flow of people, natural resources, and more importantly, the concept of philanthropy development and community development overall. And there was one particular initiative that was spawned by a San Diego philanthropist about bringing the Olympics to the border region. And then the conversation was, well, who should it include? And I then introduced to the foundation, well, you really should look at this more broadly in terms of the original people who are those that are already here, the larger tribes that were organized and eager to contribute to the concept of economic development, and shared resources. And that started a kind of a path for me in understanding the concept of sovereignty and asking the questions, well, why aren't we working more closely with Native American communities, given the number of communities that we have here? That's not reflected in the grant making. It wasn't reflected in the convening of leadership. It wasn't reflected in any of the outreach strategies, not only by the foundation, but anybody else that we were talking to. Well, it's too difficult, we can't make grants to Native communities. There was a lot of ignorance on why we couldn't structurally link with these sovereign nations. And it wasn't rocket science to figure out, well, you're dealing with a sovereign nation. There's different structures. There was different organizational leadership elements, and to say nothing of the absence of trust. These leaders have seen us come and go. We only go there when we want something to, share data on health needs on communities, and then the funding would arrive and they would never see any of it. So they had justification to not want to work with any of the leadership that was promising larger community development efforts.
Yeah, we have treaties too, the federal government.
Right.
Sure.
That's one of the reasons we have sovereign nations, and that's a lot of that's deteriorated as far as the issue of sovereignty. By when it's the major Indian laws that were passed to take away some of our jurisdiction of how we are able to deal with people that do stuff on the reservation. So a lot of that was taken away. So now we can control maybe traffic and some other minor stuff. It's called the Major Crimes Act. So sovereignty has been attacked, for over 250 years since it started, and it's kind of just inched away pieces of that as it went through. And if you look at the federal social policy that's gone on for 250 years, it's get rid of the Indians. No, let's help the Indians. No, let's get rid. So it's that pendulum that goes back and forth.
Right.
So it's been an interesting journey.
Dr. Castillo, on that score, you have Walking Shield has worked to try and increase the flow of federal money to the tribes and to make more federal resources available for what happens there. For example, you've tried to get Department of Defense money to engage with infrastructure needs in the community, and yet, as you just described, you're fighting a constant battle around the way in which these so-called sovereign nations are treated by the federal government as it either embraces them or pulls away. And we certainly seem to be in a moment where that tension is surging to the fore again, which I want to talk about a little bit. But I would love for you to reflect for a moment on what it is like to try and attract more federal resources to the work of the sovereign nations, and how you make that case after 250 years of trying to make that case.
Well, one of the biggest things is capacity building. Because these tribes don't have the staff, the person power, the skill set to go after federal grants.
Yeah.
So you have the larger tribes, and bless them. They have the staff and the skill set to go after these federal grants. And when you start talking about some of the smaller poorer tribes in San Diego, they don't have that capacity. And I'll give you an example. I was just at a tribal summit up in Northern California to Enterprise Rancheria, and a young lady from Hoopa came up and was talking to the energy companies and the state funders about applying for dollars from them. And she pointed out there's 109 reservations, rancherias in California, and only 20 of them can apply for these funds that you have. And the reason why is, as I kind of mentioned right now, is these smaller tribes, the other 80 plus tribes that didn't have that they don't have the capacity to go after those dollars. They don't have the staff. So one of the things that we work really hard is to build the capacities of these smaller, these rural tribes, be able to go after those dollars and cents. We've been involved with the Department of Defense since 1995 doing infrastructure and healthcare on reservations. And we've had 2 or 3 of the reservations have a lot of benefits from the National Guard or the Army or the Navy Seabees or our friends from the Air Force. But again, it's building that capacity to make sure that you have all your T's crossed, your I's dotted, because the military is very structured. It's very paper driven. So we help them with the paperwork and getting ready to actually meet the requirements that these military components need, as well as applying for federal resources that they haven't applied for in the past because of lack of assistance.
Yeah, I'd love to stay on that one for a second because I think it is a brilliant example of your success, and I wonder if you could share a story with us about how that has worked, where you have worked with the U.S. military to bring resources to the table that otherwise communities might not be able to access. And I'm thinking the example I sort of know myself is the cleanup of Saint Isabel. And maybe that's the example you want to talk about or not, but is there a story you can share with us to illustrate how effective this has been?
I want to give you the example with Mesa Grande. I don't know if you've ever been in Mesa Grande. They're kind of like in a pit. They're in a fire trap. They have about 30 homes way on the bottom of this Black Star Canyon and this Lisa Sutherland Dam. So the roads are dirt. There's drop-offs there. So we worked with the National Guard for 2 years. They came in, brought about 40 troops to rebuild those roads, to go towards Sutherland Dam and make them safe, widen them so that people weren't, actually going off the cliff, which is a good thing, of course. And we also did a lot of work on soil erosion, rip wraps, culvert type stuff to make those roads last. And this was actually an effort that was unique in a way because we actually had an MOU with the County of San Diego, with U.S. Forestry, and with the Mesa Grande tribe. So we're able to put together these 3 components for the benefit of each group. And the tribe, of course, had right of way. And it's a scary road, really scary road. I took one of my friends, one of our colleagues, Marvin, who you just heard a little earlier. We took him down the road. And it's really scary. He's dark skinned. So when he got down to the road, he was really light. He got really light skinned, So his first question to the tribal secretary is, there's another way out of this place? That's how scary
An intimidating road. Yeah.
Oh, it is really intimidating.
Well,
So, that's a big example of what can be done.
and it's so fascinating to me, given the complicated history, of course, between the U.S. military and the tribes and the sovereign nations. But you're making it work. That's actually why you're one of the participants in the Preface Foundation's Bridge Initiative, which is supporting nonprofits and in that are uniquely positioned to help communities build their capacity to access more resources and to assert more of their own leadership. Can you talk a little bit about this, both of you, how you see yourselves helping communities to develop this capacity to talk on their own behalf, to advocate on their own behalf, so that you're not perpetually having to do it for them?
And we take a train-the-trainer type role to do exactly what you said, to build their capacity, to get them at a level where they don't need us anymore, maybe just to call us up once in a while or just remind them, hey, by the way, the IRT request is due, September 30th. So we've gotten many tribes to that point. It does take time because each tribe's different, so it does take time. And probably you're familiar that a lot of tribes go through changes in tribal government, tribal leadership. Some have elections every 2 years or 4 years. There's one tribe in San Diego's election every year. That's for all the council people.
Wow.
So that makes it difficult, but it's not staggered.
Yeah.
So So we work with tribal leadership, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, I think Santa Isabel, as you mentioned earlier, is probably one of the ones that we work with for many years that have gone to a capacity where they're really good about writing grants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're just now building their capacity to engage in the military programs, that can provide additional support, infrastructure, and healthcare. There are more Native Americans in the military based on the population than any other minority in the United States. So you have a lot of Native Americans in the military. And then I knew that a long time ago, but I was at the Pentagon meeting with one of the generals. He kind of mentioned that to me. And I go, yeah, you're right. And that's very true. There's a lot of Indian people in the armed forces. So, we get to the trainer. I know Mariano can add more because we do these multi-year plans that, if it's okay, he can share about the multi-year plans that we work with.
Yeah, Mariano, if you would.
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that you brought up, Grant, was the notion of sovereignty. And when we talk about capacity building and leadership development as the nonprofit sector delivery system to increase organizational performance, whether it's health, education, whatever that it might be, that by literal definition, how you work with sovereign nations in leadership development and capacity building is that the notion of a nonprofit structure is very different. Many of the tribal nations are not set up as nonprofits.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to really understand the mechanisms of how financial resources could be delivered on native country and specific tribes, with the expectation that grant compliance, delivery, reporting is going to be similar. And if you don't do that background, you're just going to step in cement, because there's just not that natural understanding of just philanthropy that's organized and why you would pursue grants. And if we look at native country, the delivery system for financial resources is federal grants. And you have really specific departments that you have to understand and work with if you're going to be successful in securing a federal grant. And the requirements for the different departments that deliver USDA monies or Department of Defense contracting, whatever the opportunity might be, is that qualification for those grants requires a lot of readiness at the organizational level to even compete for the funding. Many of these contracts require land use plans, environmental impact studies, water delivery and management systems to even fill out the application. And so that's what John was pointing out. Our approach has to be in a collaborative fashion to work with our tribal partners where they are.
Right.
And without any judgment about what they need to be, how they need to be it. We don't even talk about leadership development because they're elected officials responsible for the development and well-being of all members. So their concept of that kind of work is shaped by the federal delivery system that requires them to have set up committees of governance and community engagement, the kinds of things that is reported by the federal government in terms of use of its monies. And it's usually the larger foundations or tribes that understand that and can have staff in place to actually collect information to submit an application. The organization, the tribes that we're working with are just not staffed to even fill out an application. And so the capacity building approach that we've taken is to develop multi-year planning agendas that are health related so that the elected officials and their members determine what the needs of the reservation are that is outside the federal funding box, so that when we look at the issues of infrastructure, why they don't have water, the questions that I've learned from John is to ask, well, what do you need water for? Well, to grow food, to drink,
Right.
to deliver to the new housing. And these are very basic questions in terms of the planning. Well, if it's water, then how do we go from what you need to actually putting together the planning that allows you to decide what is that learning path to arrive at, then what is the data that you need to then compete for funding. So that is a larger slice of what we deal with, in the sense that
Yeah.
many of our tribal leaders, that agenda changes every 2 years. They have an election.
Yeah.
So we have to then start you have to start that cycle again. So our multi-year plans that developed by Walking Shield helps to inform the newly elected council that comes in that the core issues are still water, land management, affordable housing,
Right.
and those things shouldn't change every 2 years. So that allows Walking Shield to identify the planning, the funding source we want to apply for. We do the proposal writing if needed, to get them ready to submit a competitive application for funding and manage that grant if it's received, to how to be in compliance and perform the project to actually build the infrastructure within the time period that the federal government calls for.
I think I really appreciate that description, because it nicely captures the complexity of the literal landscape that you're dealing with, and that you are working to help be successful. I'm also mindful of how rich it is with ironies, given the past experience you've had, and so, for example, I wasn't in the room, but I know from hearing from you and others afterward that there was this moment in a discussion among the Bridge Initiative cohort about what was happening on the national scene, and Dr. Castillo, I think it might have been you, who said, we've been dealing with this back and forth in terms of support, non-support with the federal government for 250 years. It's not exactly new. And it's sort of set in perspective for everybody in the room that there's a lot of history here that you're working to overcome. At the same time as you're trying to reflect that with integrity across the landscape of all the tribes that you work with, you are having to face the reality of a government that may decide, or administration that may decide, at least has talked about, taking away the special status of sovereign nations, and of imperiling the nonprofit status of organizations that serve specific populations. Writ broadly, that gets dismissed in the whole DEI context, but this is really the part of the ancient foundational text of the founding of the United States of America, and who was here before the country came to exist. And so how are you navigating that very complicated terrain and thinking about it in the context of the day-to-day work that you're doing with the tribal entities that you're working with on building capacity, which feels like absolutely essential work and almost impossible to think about in the context of an onslaught like I just described. So can you just talk about that with us for a moment, about how you're processing it?
Sure. We've already faced that in the 1950s. There's a termination policy. The federal government instituted to terminate federal recognition of tribes. Unfortunately, we had to go to courts. A lot of the tribes had to go to courts and reinstate their federal recognition. But like terminating what you just said, these treaties or the relationship, no longer they were required to provide any federal funds, right? So, tribes that had a very good industry, say in timber, no longer had that great industry, or those with dealing with salmon, those that had developed economic development on the reservations. So those funding dollars dried. So, but you're right. It's a challenge, as far as nonprofits. For us, for instance, is diversifying our funding sources so that we're not dependent on the federal government. It's that's been some of the things Walking Shield for the last 20 years has done quite a bit, because we recognize the dilemma if you depend on one financial source. In this case, unfortunately, our Native people are depending on the federal government resources.
Mariano, anything to add there?
Oh yeah, I mean that is the key, and I think John pointed out to you. I mean, before the new federal administration, we've always been struggling with trying to bring organized philanthropy to understand that there are people in our backyard that are well positioned to work for a mutual end in benefiting all segments of our community. Part of what the discussions that we're having with our tribal leadership is something that they are now putting into play, which is the concept of co-management. That the availability of water, the protection of natural resources, the need for affordable housing has a lot of integrated possibilities with local governments that surround Native reservations. And I'll point out that if some of our larger partners, the majority of resources spent in quote community development is on litigation. Suing over water rights, over sovereignty land rights, and winning now in the courts because of just how treaties have been enforced or not enforced. So leadership is now asking the question, well, we have a shortage of water, and it's driven by climate change and moving from food production to vineyards, because we all believe that everybody needs a better quality Merlot, but the fertilizers used to grow grapes is polluting the commonality of the water source that farmers downstream use. That's poisoning the fish. So the concept of co-management on tribal lands is how to look at people, land, assets, to then work with local government to say, how do we approach this locally and jointly, so that not only does it provide for all of us, but there's potential revenue sources to be developed. The Kurok tribe, in terms of wildfires, the move toward native management of land in terms of regular burns that counter the wildfire situations that we have. Well, they're training now local fire departments in those concepts, and they're now training local Native youth to become firefighters, not only for the reservation, but local fire departments in a shared resource of how we avoid burning down the whole region. So the co-management concept is very, very important, gets us off the litigation path potentially, because fish need water and you need water for grapes. I mean,
But I'm wondering, does it make sense or is it possible in the context of the federal environment that that you now find yourselves operating in? I'm thinking about how many of the projects that you've talked about over the years have had to do with clean energy and sustainability, and co-management of water is another beautiful example. And those, it would seem to me, are suddenly encountering a very hostile policy environment. Does it matter? Do you forge ahead? How do you think about how to work on, because it's a good idea what you're describing. I'm just curious how you continue to win on it in an environment where there's such hostility toward it.
Well, I'll take a shot, and then John can add his perspective, just from the leadership position. But I think that there's tremendous hope in that concept, because failure to respond to our natural resources and their availability and use. I mean, that is a common factor that impacts us all. And the failure to do that is failure for everyone. And the most ironic thing that I've learned in this work with Walking Shield is to, when we reach out to environmental funders or programs that support environmental financing before this new administration, we could not get a meeting, which I thought was highly ironic, working with Native people who originated, the concept of Mother Nature and its protection and its need.
Right.
And what we were finding at the local level is that we weren't using the environmental language that would allow us an entry into, a funding cycle, right? And then we came up against the ignorance of program officers not knowing that there were that many tribes in San Diego,
Right.
and they don't drive out there. They don't go out there unless they're going to go to Julian to pick apples. I mean, their limitation didn't include the regional understanding of who lives here.
Right.
And if you really wanted to know about environmental protection and the importance of shared water and its usage, then let me introduce you. So that concept of co-management really has the basis of an organizing principle that it allows our young people and those who care about these issues to then learn about how people are really practicing it and how the joint knowledge exchange is a tremendous value experientially to then defend against public policies that go against it.
John, what about you? I mean, there's so much in Mariano's answer that gets at the idea of power sharing and power building, and the fact that some of these challenges have existed for a long time, as you've pointed out a number of times, and that it still requires a set of solutions that will work regardless, and the solutions kind of speak for themselves. So there's a lot there, but what do you see as the avenue of making these ideas prosper at a time when it seems like they're heading into stiff headwinds?
We've been around for a long, long time, and we're people think that all the stuff that's happened all these years of genocide or for our Native people, that we'd be gone, or a lot of tribes are gone now, and so forth. But there's still over 500 tribes left, and so we know after all this that we had to make the adjustments. We had to be strategic. We need to use resources that are available to us. And one of the things we've learned is that we need to work together in a cohesive way, because there's always strength in numbers, So we've learned that, for instance, San Luis Rey, they had to litigate for their rights to the San Luis Rey River. That was 5 tribes that worked together to get that right, because that was their treaty right. And they had to go to, like Mariano said, a lot of these things had to go to litigation. So now they're working not just with the tribes themselves, but with the local government around there, about this water resource. So that co-management can work, but we have to be strategic, finding unique answers, and move forward. We just can't give up. We've been here forever, and so it's no time to give up. It's time to be strong and move forward.
I'm curious, picking up again on something that Mariano said. I am struck by, I know this to be true, that oftentimes what you were dealing with in approaching philanthropy, let's set aside the federal government for a moment, was that the tribes were speaking one language and philanthropy had a different language, and so and the expectation was that if you were to ask somebody for money, you had to speak their language. I think part of what you've tried to do, even as you help the folks you're working with become better at working the systems that exist, you're also trying to help the systems that exist better understand the language of the sovereign nations. And to stop being so expectant about having them conform to our model. Do you feel you've been successful in terms of that? Are you making progress?
We just had, just to give you an example, yesterday we just had a meeting up here with 10 foundations doing exactly what you just said, having them understand how we as indigenous people, how we can draw from their resources and how they can fit into our tribal structures. But that's exactly the conversation we had yesterday with about 10 foundations. So there's progress. I think having Mariano, who has, like you said, 40 years of experience in philanthropy, that really helps our tribes, especially the ones in San Diego we're working with, to understand that language, what they're whatever that language you want to call it, and the tribal structures, and trying to merge it some way so they have a shot in of learning in the Indian ways. And we just, with one of the groups, I asked them, one of the tribal groups was actually Los Coyotes, I asked them, would you be interested if I can bring one of the foundations to your reservation? I think that's extremely important, is that the foundation folks really see what's going on the reservation. They can hear from me and Mariano and see some pictures and stuff, but it sure makes a difference when somebody actually goes over there and sees what the roads look like, see how the housing looks like, see the poverty that exists in San Diego County and some of these reservations. That really makes a difference. So we're working right now on getting some of these foundations. Why don't you come out and visit, and we ask, of course, some permission from the tribal government first. We don't want to just start inviting people to come over.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, we were talking just a tad earlier, is taking a different strategic approach, coming up with new ways to break that gap. And so we want to work together, and Mariano's probably pointed out in the past, and so little money in philanthropy has gone to Native organizations and Native tribes in the history of philanthropy. So
I have to say something, and I'll own up to something, that in terms of the work that we do, I think one of the things that is so important in the language development that seems to always reinvent itself. Well, now we're calling it this, so you got to now shift over there and learn the definitions, and that there really is a level of urgency, Grant, to this work. It's not like community development in Los Angeles, where you already have existing infrastructure, you already have housing. The question is, how do you improve it and build more? And I think to John's point, taking people into, your backyard, where literally, you had an infrastructure project that, built a new sewer system, in a Native neighborhood. And it's wonderful. But they ran out of money to connect the plumbing system from the individual homes to the new sewer system. And it's literally 10 feet away, and before the new sewer system and water delivery that was built at huge cost, the people who lived in these new homes had to drink water from the backyard hose. Now, and we go there, and the project was completed 6 years ago. We go there, and they're still getting their water from that backyard hose. So the question that's got to be looked at, and the urgency, and I think the attitude that's got to come with that, is you would never tolerate that in your neighborhood.
Right.
You would never accept those conditions for you and your children. And here this family, does this every day. And the indignity that comes with, using the backyard hose to collect your water. I mean, it's just so over the top with me that I just want to tear my hair out. And it really is, difficult to then sit at the table and with a group of funders that have resources and have staff to actually finance their own learning, however you want to approach it, right? Do a study or just hire a Native American to drive you out, 10 miles. That is the difficulty of the modeling and the language.
Yeah.
So
Such a great example.
yeah, you want to hear the end of that? So there's a happy story to it, right? So I was meeting I go to, Indian Health Services is responsible for water delivery on the reservation. So I was meeting in Maryland with the higher ups, with the way high up people. And I told them, hey, I'm on the grassroots level. I'm telling you a story right now, what's going on this reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't believe they were hearing, because they're at this policy level and they're not getting that information, So I told them all about it. And so after about another year, they were able to send more resources to finish those pipes and stuff to these homes. But it took a while before, like Mariano said, they ran out of funds a while back. And it was sad. And we didn't learn about it because sometimes, even though we're trusted by these reservations, sometimes it takes them a while to share a little bit more information because, they don't want to be embarrassed or whatever, whatever you want to call it. So as they begin this trust and relationship with us, they say, there's another one over here that we need to tell you about. Yeah. So as we learn, we can make those efforts at a higher level. I haven't been to Washington, D.C. Since COVID, and I'm probably not going to go for a couple more years. But we work with Congress on both sides. I work with Indian Health Services. I work with the Pentagon to keep them informed of what our needs are in Indian country so they can hear from the grassroots level.
So let me ask you, we're running out of time. Let's see if we can do a lightning round of a couple of questions because I want to get these in. Just can you reflect for a second about what partnership among government and philanthropy and tribal nations looks like when it's working well?
It looks like success.
Okay, how about an interim step?
Well, it takes people around to come around the table with a common goal. And if you have a win-win situation, that's when it works the best. So for the military, when they come in and work with us, they're getting the training and get ready for deployment readiness, which we hope they never have to be deployed. It's also an extra retention tool for them. It keeps them at the reserves signing back up. It's excellent for the tribes that now have new roads or water wells or bridges or homes or electrical lines. I mean, it keeps going on and on. And of course, so the tribe wins, and then Walk and Shield, whose mission is to improve the quality of life for our reservations, and off-reservation communities, we all win. So if you can get a partnership that we all win, it's so much better than trying to fight with each other over something,
But that's a good question, Grant, in that we have tribal partners that are trying to organize around those co-management concepts. But there's a tribe in Northern California that's one of our tribal partners that we try to visit as often as we can. And their approach was to organize their assets around alternative energy and built the casino and the housing and all the infrastructure with the end goal of developing alternative energy resources and reinvest in the reservation to generate the employment, to generate the infrastructure, to look at all revenues that come in to the reservation that doesn't go to its members. It's reinvested, in the reservation.
Right. And
it's the alternative energy development that is financing the co-management opportunities. Now you have a situation where the tribe's success in energy management and revenue production is that they now are the primary partner for fire management in the region. They built a heliport on the reservation to support fire management, suppression, and recovery. They have purchased fire equipment that exceeds any ability of local government to have. And it's a shared now resources. Yeah. They're training their firefighters on the new hook and ladder they bought. Mm-hmm. So the concept of success, it really is in this co-management, and doesn't always start in a friendly situation. But it does create friendships because local government has now to work with them because the tribe is now selling stored electricity to downtown.
Right. What I love about that example is it's sort of the process itself brought out the shared interest that maybe
Oh God, yes.
one of the partners didn't
Well,
want to acknowledge existed at the front end, which I think is often true of partnerships. Okay, quickly, because we're running out of time. I think in this era, it's important to end on a note of hope. Although I found a lot to be hopeful about in this conversation, but I would love to know what you talk about to give other people hope, or that gives you hope, that you would want to share with our audience right now.
For us, for Walking Shield, we've working together with foundations and government. We made a major difference, but it's a partnership. It's a collaboration. So our strength is working with a lot of different partners to make a difference, and so that we all look good, right? And the people in the community that really needs the help, whether it be eyeglasses or a safe road to drive on, everybody gets a pat on the back. So we made a difference, but it's a collaborative process. We just can't do it by ourselves.
Right. And Mariano, what about you?
Walking Shield is a service organization. And what I mean by that is that we work with our tribal partners to serve their interests, their self-determination plans based on what they want to do, separate from a funding source, or what is it that you want to achieve, what's the plan, and how do we do that? And working with outside partners, the ones that we're trying to develop, is the same approach. How can we be of service to you to achieve your economic development goals that could include Native American communities and reservations that has land, that has people in which they're looking to improve their quality of life? What is the match points that we can identify and act on?
Beautiful. What I heard in those very quick answers was partnership and service. And it's interesting. That as a source of hope is probably the most enduring source we could ask for, saying that you find it in how people work together and how they serve each other. I just want to thank you both for taking the time to sit with me today and talk about this. It has been a rich conversation that we easily could have gone another hour on, but unfortunately we don't have it. So just thank you both, and thank you, more importantly, for the extraordinary work you're doing.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Grant.
Krista, what do you think?
I think it was very deep, a lot to unpack.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot of very serious material to cover, and for me, I was struck by how many times the concept of sovereignty came up, and the complex ways of viewing that, and how important that understanding is for anybody working with the notion of self-determination among people.
Yeah.
So I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, it stood out to me because I think we hear those words, self-determination, all the time, right? But it seems like those partnerships with government, with the military, really allow the tribes then to really shape what they want the course of their future to look like. So
I was struck too by, the long view. So the perspective that the challenges that we're facing in the moment are in many respects old and familiar to tribal nations, and so less inclined to panic about it in the moment and to think about issues like environmental stewardship and co-management of the land as long-term challenges and goals, and to think about partnerships and bridging divides as long-term challenges and goals.
Right.
And recognizing, and soberingly so, to hear that, there have been plenty of reversals over the course of hundreds of years, and how important it is to keep moving toward the goal anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the wisdom of Dr. Castillo, as I listened and reflected, he's right? That's not just for the tribes, that's for a lot of our history, right? You have to hold that long view. You talk about that even in philanthropy, playing that long game, having the long view of things. And so I imagine the amount of patience it takes, but also the persistence to make sure your folks are ready when that moment strikes where you can move your goals forward in I just found really impressive and something I'm going to sit with.
Yeah, a lot to sit with on this. And I think probably one of the most important lessons on top of that is how we should listen rather than speak so often, that it is important to meet people where they are and to recognize different traditions and to accept that as part of how we engage with other human beings.
Right.
Really a lot of wisdom in terms of how philanthropy should operate and how we would hope government would as well. So a good conversation in terms of some very important themes.
Agreed. I'm so grateful that they made themselves available to us for this interview. And thanks for unpacking it with me.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Stop. Talk to me.